Hello, I'm Shane Schultz from Serenely Speaking, and this is the Arisen Strength podcast. Folks, we do this show because we feel there are far too many dreams, talents, and capabilities that are being suppressed for whatever reason. Whether it be injury, illness, or life experiences, these situations have a way of finding us being robbed of what it is that makes us special and unique in this world, our passions. Here at Arisen Strength, we encourage people to pursue their passions in spite of the challenges they face. Now, how we do that is with our three-pillar concept. Number one, we support. Number two, we empower. And after all that work, number three, we have the right to celebrate. Folks, that's the Arisen Strength concept. Our goal is to help bring back the passions of life to you again. Tonight is a very special night as we bring you a new series of shows called # Life is Worth Living. But before we get to that, let me go ahead and introduce to you our good friend, Wayne the Hack Hacker. Wayne, it's great to have you here tonight.
Thanks a lot, Shane. It's good to be here, as it is every time we bring a new episode. This is episode 22. It's the first, like I said, as you mentioned, this is the first in our series, Life is Worth Living, on the suicide awareness, and it's going to be a series on suicide awareness, suicide prevention, and it's going to be a challenging series. It's a very tough subject. We're not going to be able to do it in one episode. We're going to, we're spreading it out over a month or more. We're going to do 4 episodes, I guess, in this series in total.
Total of 4 episodes, yep.
And we're not going to be doing it alone. We're going to be doing it with some partners.
We are. I knew that this was going to be a very big series for us, and I wanted to do it in a collaborative effort. So I decided to go ahead and mention to our good friends of Arisen Strength, maybe they might want to help us out in bringing this message out. And they were all too willing to do so. I mean, they were very receptive to it. And, we've got some great friends who have been on the show, as well as people who have helped us out, all throughout the year. We've got Rustic for Life, which is Angela Harding, which she has actually joined the Arisen Strength family not too long ago, and that's something that's very exciting for us. We also have the Anxiety and Depression Warriors. The Warriors are awesome. They're 2.0. It's a Facebook group that's out there, and that is Dan the Man. Dan the Man helped us out when it came to introducing the human factor, as well as the importance of donorship. And when he talked about his transplant that he got from his son. We've got Serenely Speaking, which is my company. That's my professional public speaking company. We have Lupus Diva May Wellness Project. That is something that she helped us out with our lupus show, obviously. But she's also going to help us out a lot more in the near future. And she's doing some things called the Wellness Project that she's helping out. I think it's like 10 people at a time she's doing. So she's doing something that's very informative and helpful to others. We've got the Unveiling Stigma Facebook group. They've been with us for the longest time. That's Harper, my good friend, and also Charles, of which has been on the show, talking about autism as well as transplants, of which he happened to have one that was very successful, and he's doing very well with that. Then we've got our good friends at World Lyme Day. Now that's Terry and Rebecca. They are great friends of mine. And they've decided to, jump right on board with us. In fact, they came to us asking if they could be part of it, because they know how serious of an issue suicide awareness is, not only in general, but specifically to people who are dealing with Lyme disease. Then we've got our Days community. Days community is fantastic. They are helping us out a great deal. That's Ellen Stone. She definitely wanted to be part of it, and so she jumped on. And then we've got Hope Over Pain Empowerment, and that's an organization that is yet up and coming, but I know a lot about it. and it's something that is out there to help a lot of people. So we've got quite a few friends that are helping us in this journey to bring out not only awareness to the subject, but also to do a workshop so as to be able to help people from getting to that point of suicidality in their lives. So very excited about it.
Yeah, when we talk about suicide prevention, I guess we want to make sure that we're clear about that we're not talking about getting involved in the middle of a suicide attempt, and that crisis point. We're talking about the suicide prevention that leads up to the crisis. What are the things that we can be doing in our lives so that we don't get to that point where now it's a crisis issue that requires professional intervention? When 911 needs to be called, when the crisis unit needs to be called, when doctors need to get involved, when there's a hospitalization that's required for crisis stabilization. Okay, that's when things are really, really serious. And we're not talking about that part. That's a really important part, a really very important piece. Mm-hmm. But we're going to be focusing more on that precursor, what's leading up to it. What are the things that I could be doing in my life? What are the warning flags that maybe that I should be aware of, and our experiences in there. So so we talk about suicide prevention. I guess I want to be clear that that's the prevention piece of what we're talking about.
Yeah, we always say, look, we're not doctors, we're not therapists, we're not psychiatrists. We're people who have had our own experiences that have been able to be able to broadcast in a number of different ways, whether it be radio or podcast or video or however we choose to do it. And, we're here to help the person while the professionals treat the patient. Now, how we talk about this particular series, which is hashtag Life is Worth Living, this particular show, episode 22, is about suicide awareness. It's bringing awareness to what suicide really is. The reason why is because we're very transparent, and I've often spoke about my struggles and challenges that I've had with suicidality because I have a lot of experience with it. So my experiences are going to be part of this show quite a bit. But then we also are going to have 3 more shows that are going to be talking about how to help a person not get to that path of that struggle of suicidality, of not getting to that moment as to where somebody is actually thinking that they have to make a decision whether to take their own life or not to. Because if we're at that point, it's a crapshoot, as to whether or not that person's actually going to survive if they choose to commit themselves to suicide. Or, and then maybe they might pull themselves away from it. But we don't want to get it to that point. We don't want to fool around with that. We want to make sure is to be able to not get on that path towards that decision. So we're going to be talking about things like value, and we're going to be talking about purpose, and we're going to be talking about the things that actually get people to that path, and we're going to try to keep people from doing that, and we're going to use the foundations and the pillars of Arisen Strength to do so. I really believe that this series is going to really emphasize the foundations of Arisen Strength. I think that you're going to see the self-esteem portion, which we talk about as taking ownership, accountability. That's a very big thing, and valuing oneself. And then you're going to have the power of turning the thought, and of course, the freedom of acceptance. I think you're going to see that this series is going to emphasize those a great deal, along with our pillars of the show, which are support, empower, and of course celebrate. So anyways, so this is something that we were looking forward to. To be honest with you, Wayne and I have not shot a video in quite a while. We've had some challenges going on. We've had a camera that went down. Then we had recording that didn't work and everything in that sense. So we've had our own different types of challenges. But we've had some things that have been going on over the past couple weeks that have kept us from being able to do what it is that we do. So we're just getting back into the swing of things, and I know that you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Well, as a pro-life tip out there to people, if you need to get yourself colonoscopy, which I had to do this week, it was I got a hotel room, and that made all the difference in the world. At least the place where I live, I couldn't have gotten the unfettered access to the bathroom and maybe the necessary privacy to deal with the prep situation beforehand. And it also makes cleanup a lot easier when you're doing this through a hotel. So, and I also have a struggle with anxiety around medical stuff like that. So this was really made all the difference in the world for me to be able to choose. All right, I'm not going to talk myself out of doing this. I had been doing that and putting it off and skipping appointments, but finally going through it and working with my therapist and decide, okay, get the room. And after getting the room, it made all the difference in the world. And it was although when I was there for the morning of the procedure, my blood pressure was way up, much higher than normal. They weren't that alarmed by it because they see that a lot. But it was but even when it was all done, it was like, oh, that wasn't that bad. I really I knew it would. But I got myself all worked up over nothing. But you can't deny the fact that you're worked up when you're worked up. It's, it's like, I have to put things into place to make sure I get through it. Breathing exercises, mental preparation, just sort of, fake it till you make it. Whatever you got to do to get through the situation, is what I had to kind of do. It wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't just as simple as saying, oh, no big deal, just do it. But when I was all done, it was like, oh, no big deal. I should have just done it. But I have to respect my emotions and my feelings while I'm doing it and not beat myself up for feeling, you were such a fool. Why would you let your anxiety run away with you? Well, it does. But I got through it, and that was the important part.
And I think that, again, we're talking about acceptance. You accepted the fact that you had to take that test. You had to have that done because you were doing a full workup, making sure that things were going in the right direction, and this happened to be one of them that you were doing, and you've been doing for quite a while, over the past month and a half now. And then after you accepted that fact, you empowered yourself by saying, okay, I'm going to do it this way now. And yes, I could have really hidden behind a whole lot of excuses and so forth not to get it done. But then when you made that decision to get a room, to have that ability to be able to take care of that situation as needed, you came back and you were much better than what it is that I would have expected. So that was a good thing. And I think that really goes to show that we have those thoughts in our mind that, we do have those distorted thoughts to where we're trying to validate the way that we feel. You were feeling quite a lot of anxiety with it, and you were feeling a whole lot of, unknown with it, and therefore your mind was trying to match that. And it was trying to say, okay, well, I feel anxiety, so I got to have a whole lot of anxious thoughts, right? And I gotta validate what it is that you're feeling on the inside. But when you went ahead and you made that decision to go ahead and get the hotel room, to be able to take some ownership, to be able to take charge a little bit, next thing you know, you went, you had it done, you ccame back, and you're better for it. So,
I was physically and emotionally drained when I came back, but I definitely felt a lot better. Yeah. I felt, talk about that self-esteem piece. I took some ownership. I held myself accountable. I went ahead. I did it. And then at the end of the day, I had anticipated I would feel this way, but I was glad I did it, and I felt good about myself that, hey, I can do this. Does that mean the next time I have one of these, it's going to be a snap? Probably not. I'm probably going to have to go through very much the same thing, but it's going to be familiar territory, and I'll get through it. But it was certainly really good to get through it one time and survived it. But it was not. I would say it was not a cakewalk. It wasn't one of the snap thing like, oh, just do it. It was, I mean, that was a part of it, but it was, it was still work. I mean, and along the way, it still worked, but I couldn't buy into that. Right? I can't become a victim of my own emotions. Slave to my emotions. Well, I can't feed that anxiety. You just got to play through it. Play through the pain, as they say.
Well, you kicked the can, is what it was, and it gave you that freedom to be able to accept what it is that the situation was, and that it then had you starting to turn the thought, and next thing you know, you were empowered from that point forward. So, I mean, I'm very proud of you for doing that, and I mean, for me personally, these past 2 weeks have been kind of rough. I've been dealing with a few things. A good friend of mine, a golf buddy, had passed away. He was diagnosed with cancer 2 weeks ago, and he happened to pass away last Thursday. And it was one of those things as to where you just didn't have enough time in order to be able to get out what it is that you wanted to say or do or anything in that sense. And then on top of it, I was still dealing with my anxiety, my depression, along with the 9/11 thoughts, as well as the anniversary of my best friend who had passed away, which was on the 13th of September. I talked about it on the last show. But my depression doesn't go by show, from the different episodes. It can last for quite a while, and it was doing so. And then on top of it, I was working a contract, a short one, thankfully, as to where, I was working to the point as to where I was pretty much exhausted. So we had a lot of different things. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, the reason why we're talking about it is because this very type of thing that we're talking about can lead somebody to that path of depression, can lead somebody to that path as to where next thing you know, they're wondering, why am I here? I don't want to live anymore. Or I don't want, this is just getting too hard. Why do I have to be in depression all the time? Why every time when somebody dies, why is it that I go into, this depression that lasts for a month and a half? Or, in Wayne's situation, why is it that I have to be there and I have to be anxious to the point as to where I'm paralyzed almost in my own home? And those are the types of things that can go around, and they can send you to that path that we're trying to avoid. We're trying to make it so that you don't get there, because it's one of those things. It's almost like a conveyor belt. There is no. It's not two ways. It's only one direction, and it's going towards the direction as to where you start thinking about different decisions that you might not have thought about before, but they are definitely permanent decisions, on a temporary situation. So, that's something that, that's why we're talking about these things, these average things, because it's not always a tragic thing that can lead you to that point of feeling like taking your own life.
I think we've all heard the expression, right? The straw that breaks the camel's back. Mm-hmm. That sometimes if you put enough things on there, enough mundane things like pieces of straw, eventually there's going to be, it's going to be too much. And so it doesn't take big events necessarily. It can be little things that you might just normally push off and just like, well, and then just, and then don't really deal with or don't really process. I think one that helps, and this is a big part of this, is the idea of having objectives or purpose. That's a big part of it. If you can have a general purpose in your life that you're working toward, that's always good. Sometimes you can have short-term goals, and then you work toward those short-term goals. So like with the colonoscopy, it was really just kind of, okay, I had to imagine the finish line there, and then what are the little different steps that I have to do. So whether it's check into the hotel. Okay, now I'm not thinking about the procedure. I'm thinking, okay, I just need to check into the hotel. Got myself checked into the hotel. Got to set my prep up for what I'm going to do. Okay, also brought my computer to make sure I can get onto the Wi-Fi. So step by step, just doing the little things I needed to be doing. Get myself hooked up. to the internet so that I could be in communication with people, to do the next step. The next morning it was, take the shuttle to the hospital. Again, I'm not thinking, I'm not living in the future completely.
Being very mindful. Yeah.
I've set out what my goal was, and then I've worked what my steps are, and then each day or each moment, in this case, each hour, I'm working toward my goal by saying, okay, what can I do now that works me to my goal, but that doesn't put me in my goal yet. Again, I don't want to live there. I want to live in the moment. I want to embrace the moment. I want to make sure I'm doing what I can right now and focusing on that and doing those little things. And before you know it, at the end of the day, after all this, I was done. I was ready to go home. And it was just a matter of scrambling to get a ride from the hospital to get home. The hospital wouldn't release me unless I had somebody with me because of the anesthesia, and they didn't want to turn me loose on the streets of Troy, New York.
Yeah, that's when the anxiety really came into play. But again, we're bringing this up because, as you said, it's the straw that broke the camel's back. It's those things that add up. And then, when I first, the whole idea about suicide awareness and prevention, it's the awareness month is September, but we weren't thinking about that, to be honest with you. When we developed a schedule for this year, it was, we already had things in mind. We already had thoughts going on. And to be honest with you, when we were talking about chronic illness, which was our last series, we talked about lupus. We talked about mold awareness. We talked about Lyme disease. We talked about multiple sclerosis. We talked what else? Fibromyalgia. Those types of things. When we were talking about that, I knew that was time to start talking about what it's like to be in that mode, as to where taking your own life could be in play. And one of those things is to where when we would sit there and we would talk with the different people with our interviews and our research and everything, I felt the anguish that people were feeling. When you're talking about these autoimmune illnesses, what was going on is that, they were going to doctors, and their doctors were telling them, no, you don't have this, but I don't know what you do have. So I'm going to treat you with the symptom. That was just, it was maddening, to realize that, not only are you sitting there not feeling well, but your days are going by, your years are going by in some instances. And that can lead somebody to a very depressed state of mind, and it can, the chronic fatigue is something that can, be terrible, and that's something that can start having you neglect yourself, neglect your sleep, neglect your nutrition. Talk about, Lupus Stephen May, she'll tell you right off the bat, first thing to talk about is your diet, is a healthy diet. I'll be the first one to tell you sleep is necessary. Now, I'm not very good at it, but, I get 4 hours approximately every day, but you want to make sure that you're getting your sleep, because that'll definitely help you when you're going through what it is that you're going through. These are just some of the things that we're going to be talking about. But this show is as successful as it is I think in large part because of the transparency of the show. Now, Wayne personally hasn't come to that conclusion, that time where he found himself thinking about taking his own life. He knows some stories. He knows some experiences that he's had of friends that he's known in the past. I personally have been there. I personally have been to the point as to where taking my own life was definitely an option. And not only an option, it was the only answer in a lot of ways. So, that's why this show is meant to bring awareness to something that needs awareness brought to it, because there's a lot of things that are going on right now in this world, and to where there's just like these illnesses, these conditions, and the next thing we were talking about chronic illness. I kind of forgot all about the other shows that we did. Suicide does not discriminate. It goes from the very young to the older or the elderly. And we talked, our very first show on Arisen Strength was about bullying. And that happens to be the very leading reason why young people are committing suicide, is due to bullying, whether it be in person or big time now when it comes to cyberbullying. Yeah, there's that. Then there's the mental health aspect of things, which we did a whole series of shows when it came to that. We talked about addiction. Wayne and I both deal with the struggle and the challenges of addiction. So and that happens to be a very large reason why somebody might come to that conclusion that taking their own life is the only answer. So there's a lot of things that are going on in this world that can lead you down to that path, and that's something that's why this is a big challenge, and that's why we ask for our friends to help us. So, anyways, now when it came to the show. This one's about awareness. Now, somebody actually got onto the Facebook, the event page, and said, geez, my God, you're going to talk about suicide awareness. You're going to make it so that my friends who are very vulnerable right now are going to think about suicide. Can we not do that? And I totally understood where he was coming from, because like I said, this is Suicide Awareness Month, September, so there's a whole lot of things that are going on. There's there's organizations that are doing walks. There's different dinners that are going on out there that are in regards to awareness and different types of things that are trying to bring suicide prevention into the mainstream. And I understood what he was saying, and that's why we've done it the way that we're going to do it. We're not doing it just for one show. We're not doing it just to bring awareness to suicide. We're doing it to bring prevention to suicide the way that we know how. And I think what you're going to find is that throughout the series, you're going to find that our foundations of Arisen Strength are very much emphasized. And, so I promised him that, this is going to be a little bit different. This is going to be like a workshop so as to not get to that point of thinking about taking your own life. And I know that that's something that you were very integral about.
Yeah, I think it's really the awareness part. I think one lesson we can all take from this is, anybody that you know in your life could possibly be contemplating suicide, and you don't know it. You don't really know what's going on in other people's heads. And so that's part of the awareness program here, is just to remind us not to be complacent, not to just think that everything is okay. The person who commits suicide is not going to be like you might see in a TV show, or, where it's the person is just this really depressed, morose person who maybe even starts making jokes about dying, TV will have a way of presenting it that it's easy to see. Yeah. But that's because they're telling a story, and with stories you don't like plot elements to come out of the blue. You're telling a story, so you want to paint a picture.
They want you to follow along.
You wouldn't recognize who the happy characters are and who the sad characters are. That's part of TV. But in the real world, it's a lot harder to pick up on that. So just being aware that these kind of things can happen can make you a little bit more sensitive to the very, very subtle clues, the things that maybe now start popping a little bit for you, that, oh, yeah, I should be aware of that. I should, it's okay. And it's okay to be aware of this. But it is a fact that, if you are prone to suicide and somebody close to you commits suicide, your risk of committing suicide jumps way up. Yeah. So suicides will happen a lot of times in clusters. You'll see it in a small town somewhere. 3 or 4 kids will commit suicide in one term of school, within a couple of weeks of each other, and they might go a couple of years and not have that. So it's like, oh, what happened there? Because these little clusters do happen, and it's not just coincidental cluster. It's a lot of times there's a little causation going on where it does maybe make you think about it a little bit more, and maybe in a sense it gives you permission. Oh, somebody else did it and it worked for them. Maybe now it's going to work for me. but it's not that person doing it pushed you there. I mean, you were kind of already there. And a lot of times we do this when our mental conditions is a lot of times we're just looking for an excuse to do whatever it is that we're going to do. We've kind of made a decision in our mind that we're going to do something. It's, especially very distorted thinking. And a lot of times you're looking for a rationalization. You're looking for an excuse. You're looking for a trigger. You're trying to, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, we try to justify how we're feeling with our actions. Mm-hmm. It's a way of like self-validation. And so if I'm feeling like I'm suicidal, sometimes it's going through with it is a way of sort of justifying that. And, and when somebody else does it, it kind of almost is that permission in a little bit. And so these things do happen. And I think to ignore awareness is really not the way to go. We should all be a little bit aware and take a little bit of time out like we are here. And we're going to actually take a lot of time out because we want to do it over several shows. And we have a lot of partners helping us out and supporting us with this effort because there's a lot of things to consider and to talk about.
Well, I think one of the reasons why also you find like a cluster like you talk about, and actually Australia, and while I was doing the research, Australia has almost like an epidemic when it comes to younger adolescents taking their own life. And I think one of the reasons is because they want to be empathetic. They want to feel what it is that somebody was going through, but it's so unknown, and this is not something that's talked about a whole lot. I can assure you, this is not something that, in the majority of households that at the dinner table this is talked about because it scares people. It gets people to the point as to where it's like they feel very uncomfortable, and and that goes for your best friend or your family members, your mom, your dad, your grandparents, whatever. They get uncomfortable talking about this because they can't fathom losing you. And one of those things is to where here it is, you're talking about your depression. You're talking about how you just don't feel like you belong here or anything like that. They don't necessarily know what to do with that, and there's stigma when it comes to suicide. Very, very much so. This is not a weakness. This is not something that's one of those things as to where it's like, oh, the person just isn't strong mentally, no. Guess what? They actually are stronger. Want to know why? Because they've gone through it already. They've been there before they came to that path of making that decision. They've been through a whole lot, and you just didn't know it. There's a lot of people that are out there that unfortunately are friends and family members of those who have passed away because of making that choice to take their own life. And they sat there and they don't know what to do. I mean, it's like they don't understand. There's so many questions that's going on in their mind. What could I have done differently? How does this person, I love this person so much. How could they possibly think that this is something that they would have to do? And, and then there's the others that are out there who are really struggling and saying, it's like, I wasn't enough in order for them to want to live, to be around. And it kind of falls into that pattern, which we talk about a lot, is water on a grease fire. It's our instincts to not want somebody to go so much that we end up really pushing somebody in that direction.
Yeah, and I think you talked about in Australia with the, possibly the empathy piece, people trying to do something. They're trying to react to a situation, and they really just don't know how to. Right. And I know in the case of Australia, one of the problems they've had there is they've had serious cutbacks in their mental health spending in the last 10 years. So what ends up happening is you have a generation of kids coming up who really just don't have the tools to deal with the situation. Or you talk about silence in the families. People don't develop the tools necessary to deal with the situation. And then when they do get involved, sometimes it's that water on a grease fire where you're genuinely trying to help a situation, but maybe, a little bit of training, a little bit of awareness, a little education, you can deal with the situation in a way that's not going to make it worse. Because I guess really the key when you help somebody out is don't make it worse.
Yeah. And that's why we make it very clear we're not doctors, we're not therapists, we're not psychiatrists. We help the person while the professionals treat the patient. That's what we suggest for those caregivers that are out there for their family members, for their kids, for their friends, whatever the case that's going on. That's what we suggest. Go see a professional because they're the ones that can help. Now, here's the thing. It's one of those things as to where the person that's going through what they're going through, they feel that weight. They feel that burden when it comes to thinking about what it is that somebody's going to be thinking of them while they're gone. They feel that. They literally feel that. And it actually ends up being one of the reasons why somebody finally gives up. Finally gives in to the fact of where taking their own life is just going to stop the pain. It's just going to stop that weight that's on them that they're feeling and that anguish. And the problem is that these thoughts, these feelings that are going on are mostly distorted thoughts. They're mostly distorted within our mind. And what I mean by that is like when you start, it's like we talk about language. When you start talking about, well, it's always going to be this way. I'm never going to be better. It's like they'll never understand and such like that. It's this type of thing that ends up putting a person right on that path to making that decision where taking their own life is an option. And not only an option, but really the only answer when you're in that distorted frame of mind, that sick frame of mind.
Yeah, I think that's really a key to prevention is not to get to the point where suicide is your only option. Right. And certainly not even where it's your best option, to always be sort of, be willing to turn the thought so that you can get to this place where you could think of new options that you hadn't considered before. And that takes practice. It takes being a willingness to do it. Again, it gets back to that trying to validate your own feelings. When you're feeling really, really bad, it feels really good to think that, hey, I have no other choices. I've tried everything and nothing is ever going to work out ever. That kind of reinforces and justifies and validates that feeling that way. And so to challenge that thinking is very difficult, and it takes practice, and you have to do it on the little things sometimes. Well, you have to, but it really helps to practice on the little things, challenging your thinking and pushing through in little situations, so that when you get to these tough situations, you have a little bit of practice in the bank there to help you out.
Yeah, and the reason why we're talking about this is because it needs to be talked about. And whether it be that you're somebody that's actually thought about it in the past or have been there in the past as to where you've made that decision or at least contemplated that decision, or maybe you're a caregiver of somebody that whether it be a family member or a friend or somebody that has been in this situation in the past. This needs to be talked about. This is getting to the point as to where it is an epidemic right here in the United States. I mean, we're talking about over 30,000, like you said before, closer to 40,000 annually suicide rate, and it's something that is only going up. It's not going any lower. It's going up, and a lot of it. A lot of people have different reasons why that might be happening and everything. Who cares what the reason is, except for let's start with the person. I don't want to talk about the internet. I don't want to talk about the economic situation and everything like that. No. That's not what's doing it. It's the person. People have lived through depression over the years. When I say depression, I'm talking about the economical depression. They lived through that, and didn't have as many people who are committing themselves to suicide as they are right now. So it's been, we've gone through wars, we've gone through a lot of different things. The reason is because the average person in this world today is sick. They just got something that's in their mind that's just not working right, and there's a lot of reasons that are going on, but it all starts with that person. That's the one that we need to get to. We need to understand that person. We need to be able to communicate with that person. Why is it that you feel the way that you feel? Now, if you think that you can do that, go ahead and give it a shot. But if you don't think so, then you need to go and you need to go see a professional, so as to be able to, because there's no small way of doing this. There's no small thing. It's not, like I said, the stigma thing. It's not a weakness. This isn't weak at all. And it's not something as to where it's because they don't want to be around you, or that you couldn't save them, or that they just weren't they weren't able to cope with life. No, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that in their mind it is real as real can be. To taking their own life is the right answer.
And the best thing that we can do for each of us, though, is because we can't change what's in somebody else's head, but take ourselves and challenge our own distorted thinking. Make sure that we're not in a place where we're victims of our own distorted thinking. We all have distorted thoughts. We all have distorted perception. We don't have perfect vision. We don't have perfect hearing. We don't notice everything in the world that's happening around us. We are very selective in the way we do that. That's just part of being alive. It's part of the way the brain operates. The brain just doesn't have the power to process everything. So it tries to focus in on what it can and try to listen in what it can. And then your thoughts will also drive your thinking. And so because of that, you get an incomplete picture of what's really happening. You get a distorted view of the world. And then your memories are imperfect. So when you're in a situation and it triggers a memory, that could be slightly distorted or, exaggerated. So all those things are going on. And if we're careful about that with ourselves, it'll put us in a better position when we're dealing with other people who are less aware of their own sort of distorted thinking, because you're never going to convince a person who has distorted thinking if they're not willing to challenge their own thoughts. It's like trying to get an addict to quit. If they don't want to quit, they're not going to quit. And if you don't want to challenge your own distorted thinking, you're not going to. And then you're in your head, as you mentioned, it's going to be reality. Whatever is going on in your head, whatever you think is happening, whatever you think you feel, that is reality. And you're going to respond to reality. And if you've painted yourself into a corner where your only option is to commit to committing suicide, that's what you're going to do. And you can tell the person afterwards, or even at the time, that they're not seeing it clearly. But if they haven't sort of bought into this idea that, maybe sometimes I do need to challenge my own thinking. Maybe I'm not always right. No matter how right I think I am, maybe I'm not right, and I have to be able to slow down, take a breath, and get a little reality check, touch base with somebody, and then if it's in a crisis situation, call a professional.
The reason why, I can just tell you that, and I'm going to talk about, my experience here at the end here, but you've had a situation as to where you've had a friend or that you've known to where, unfortunately, they had taken their own life. Why don't you talk about how it is that came about and how you felt about that?
Yeah, this was my first real close experience with suicide. It was in college. It was a fellow graduate student who had bipolar, which years later I got diagnosed bipolar, so now it kind of hit home, resonates even more now than it did then. But bipolar is also referred to as the most deadly of the mental illnesses. About 20% of people with bipolar 1, I guess, maybe it could be bipolar, but bipolar 1, 20% end up committing suicide. And this friend of mine, Fritz, he had bipolar, and he was coming through a particularly real out there manic phase, and this is when it normally happens. There's this crash that happens after mania. The mania could go on for weeks, and I don't remember exactly how long his went on for. It was a couple of weeks, but when he finally did crash, there's this unbelievable crash that you just can't explain to somebody else if they're not bipolar or they haven't had this kind of thing happen to them. It's really, really hard to explain, but I know when I'm having my full-blown mania and I am seeing, again, distorted thinking, but I'm seeing, feeling, thinking everything at once. I'm completely connected to everything. And all of a sudden, when you come out of that, there's this void, there's this emptiness, there's this, and you really try to imagine what your life would feel like right now if you lost all your senses at once. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like that. It's like, because you go from this point of being like in completely connected to everything to being completely cut off from everything. And it literally is this crash that, there's just nothing else that can be done. I mean, one, a lot of times it's a high that you feel like you're never going to get again. You're in a dark hole now that you're never going to get out of again. You've experienced everything there is to experience, and maybe this is a sign that it's over. There's all kinds of thoughts that can hit at that point. And when my friend Fritz passed, took his life, it rocked the department. Nobody really expected it. They were, maybe we weren't that familiar, perhaps, at least, well, I wasn't with bipolar and what can really happen, and to see it, because my vision is almost, I think, that like the TV person who commits suicide, where it's like, oh, the person was depressed for a long time, commits suicide, and here's the guy that was basically bouncing off the walls 2 days ago. Because when you get this full-blown mania, man, you're not sleeping, you're talking fast, you're and then all of a sudden it's like, well, commit suicide, what? Yeah. That's not my picture of somebody who commits suicide. And it really stopped us in our tracks, and I wrote a piece reflecting on it at that time, because it was very, very meaningful for me, and that helped at least me process the situation, and it kind of laid the groundwork for a lot of years of the way I've kind of thought about suicide. And then I haven't myself felt that urge to commit suicide, but I've had that full-blown mania and that complete emptiness that follows it, and I can, even in that moment and now thinking about it, fully understand how somebody can make that choice in that moment, even if it's, it happens very quickly sometimes, but it's, I can definitely understand it. It was just
yeah, it's one of those things. My first experience was when I was younger. I don't recall how old I was. I was probably in my third grade or something in that sense. And somebody by the name of Paul from my hometown, he committed suicide. And I remember, I knew that he committed suicide. I knew his mother also. My mother knew her and everything in that sense. And it was one of those things as to where, man, it just didn't seem real. Because it just seemed as if like Paul was going to walk through the door at school any moment now, any day now. He's just sick. He's not gone. And I remember feeling that. But then I also remember he had family members who were also in my grade in school too, and he didn't talk about it. And then it got real weird. Then it got just quiet. It was pretty obvious that Paul wasn't going to walk through that door anymore, and it just got real quiet about it. It wasn't really talked about. Well, why did he choose to commit suicide? What were the things going on? And there were rumors going on and everything in that sense, but I was a little bit too young in order to be able to really grasp a hold of it. I just remember that feeling. For me personally, my first suicide moment was when I was 8 years old, and I mean that seems like a very young age, but you go ahead and you research this, and you'll find out it's not all that young. It's not too young. Let's put it that way. And I remember I found a revolver at my grandparents' house. It was rather large, and I remember putting it to my chest, and I remember saying to myself, all I have to do is pull this trigger, and then it's done. And the only reason why I wasn't able to pull that trigger was because my fingers were too small, and they weren't able to hold the gun as long. But that was my first time, and that was when I was 8. My actual first attempt was when I was 11 years old, and I happened to eat a whole bottle of aspirin at the time. And I remember laying down on the couch in a motorhome of all things, because we were coming home from a trip, and it wasn't, people will ask, well, why did you try to commit suicide? It had nothing to do with that day, really. The day was only the trigger, which I think that you were talking about. But it had to do with the ongoing self-loathing that I had for my own self, for a very long period of time, to where it was just that triggers, to where something didn't happen right the way that I expected it to, and next thing you know, it was all right in my mind. It was fully validating in my mind that taking my own life was the answer, because I didn't want to live anymore. And this was happening, and throughout my childhood, I was doing a whole lot of things. Anything that had skull and crossbones, I drank, whether it be furniture polish or like that Murphy's oil, which I think it was actually Old English is what it was, for wood finishings and stuff, and peroxide and different things that definitely are not meant to be ingested. And I was taking in these things, and each and every time I did, I would sit there and say, okay, I'm going to go now. I'm ready to go now. And it just, for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And it got to the point to where I was about 16 years old. And I remember this day as if it was only yesterday. And I remember saying to myself that I was not going to be the way that I was being throughout my childhood, because I knew if I wasn't going to live very long. And so I decided to, try to make myself so that I wasn't able to be hurt. I wasn't going to be vulnerable. I was going to be strong. I was going to be opinionated. I was going to be, helpful to others and such. So it was this type of thing, which really sounded good. And if you put it on paper, it's the right thing to do. But just like anything else, if you go to the extreme, it can be unhealthy. And that happened to lead me into my next portion of life, which was my addiction, which we both have dealt with addiction. Addiction can definitely lead you down the path to where life seems as if it's just unmanageable and it's unbearable. Is whether it be alcohol, DWIs piling up or worse. For me, gambling, it was just the emotional high, going like you were talking about the manic episodes, is where you go up so high, and then next thing you know, in my case, you lose it all. So it's like you crash. It was one of those things is where I won a lot, but I could not stop. And one of those things is to where if you can't stop when it comes to gambling, the odds will catch up to you and you will end up losing. And that's exactly what it was. I was being manipulated. So so there were multiple times that I tried committing suicide. Now, a lot of people would sit there and say, well, if there's multiple times, then he was just looking for attention. And that's another stigma type thing when it comes to suicide. I wasn't looking for attention. I was looking for, number one, the pain to stop. And number two, in some cases, I just did not feel that I fit in this world, and to the point as to where I was going to be happy about it. And so I started thinking that, something was just very, very wrong in me. And so when here it is, I was dealing with my addiction. When I finally did address my addiction, and I sat there and I was in recovery for quite a while. Next thing you know, I was still having suicide thoughts. I was still having the thoughts of, all I have to do is, I'm going down this road in New York. It's called I-88, and it's got a whole lot of potholes and everything like that, and little guardrails and stuff like that. And it's a stretch as to where you can put a pretty good amount of speed to it, and all you have to do is just turn left, and you'll go right off the mountain. And that wasn't out of my mind. That was right there, and that was on my good days. That wasn't on the bad days. On the bad days, it was like, where's the nearest tree? As to where I just want to slam on the gas to go and hit the tree. So that's the thing. And I got to tell you, this is one of those things as to where you're not going to know it. See, that's the thing, is you're not going to know that. It could be a friend of yours. It could be a family member. Look, it could be Wayne, and it could be me to Wayne, and not know it. I can tell you that I've had situations. You look at like Robin Williams. Everybody in the world was like so surprised about Robin Williams passing away. Why, I have no idea, but they were. And I actually wrote on my Facebook. I said, look, everybody is surprised about this, but him. Because he's been there before. He's been at that situation. He's been at that path as to where taking his own life was an option. And if not an option, an absolute definite going to happen. He made over 2 attempts that night alone. So, he has been there in the past. And it was why do I know that? Because I've been in that situation. I can tell you that I've literally fallen from 2 stories high. I've landed on my head, okay? And when I landed on my head and I came to, my glasses had come off. And when I landed on my head and I came to, I realized that my glasses were gone. The first thing that I said was, my glasses are broke. My glasses are broke. Not, I'm broke. Not, ow. Not anything in that sense. Now, this is from 2 stories high, and I landed on my head. So I could have broken my neck. I could have broken my back. I could have been paralyzed. I could have been dead. And the first thing that came to my mind, my glasses are broke. So after a while, I started realizing, well, there might be something else that's broke too. So let's go ahead and move around a little bit. And, for the most part, I was okay. I was all right. Now, the thing is that you don't ever fall from 2 stories high and land on your head and not be banged up. I was banged up. And, and one of those things is to where I figured it out. And next thing you know, folks, I ordered a pizza an hour later. I ordered a pizza an hour later. That's how common this was to me. That's how familiar this was to me. That's how much I was in my torment. I've been there before. I know what it's like to feel, to want to take your life, to not be on this earth. And one of those things is, nobody knew. Nobody. No friend knew. No family member knew. No coworker knew. You want to know who knew? The pizza delivery guy. He knew. Because he saw the rope burn on my neck. Now, he didn't happen to tell anybody. So really, nobody knew. And so, what I'm trying to tell you is, this is very real. This is not something that is not going to go away. As we just talked about, the numbers are going higher. They're not going lower. So we need to do something differently. We need to work on what it is that we're talking about. Our value, our purposes, our lives, for what it is that people are going through. These chronic illnesses, people are sitting there and they are existing. They are not living because of what it is that they're going through. And that is why we are moving on to where we're not just talking about just awareness. We're going to do a workshop is where we're going to try to help people as best as we can the way that we know how to. And that's why we came up with hashtag Life is Worth Living. So that's tonight's show. We will... we're going to be talking about now. We're going to change the title of the recap show because I'm tired of people being confused. People keep on thinking that we're just doing the same show over again. No, that's not the case. We're going to call it Arisen Strength Extra because what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the more memorable moments that we did tonight, as well as some new things that we're going to be bringing to the table as well. We're going to have an interview with a very good friend of mine who is a clinician. And also somebody who is very prominent in the suicide prevention realm here in this local area as well as nationally. Her name is Claudia, I'm really looking forward to getting that interview out to people so that they can learn for what it is that she knows. We're just going to keep on doing what it is that we do to be able to help out the persons that we try to do. So that's it. That's tonight's show. We're going to be on Journey into the Light. We started that again last Monday. We'll be there again this Monday.
That's on Blog Talk Radio.
Blog Talk Radio.
If you want to find out what we're doing, the easiest way to do that, arisenstrength.com.
Arisenstrength.com has been born. Yep.
So we have a new website. You can get from there. You can see our Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Blog Talk.
We have our own blog.
Yeah, blogs. There's Shane's blog and Wayne's blog. So we have our blogs there. Get hooked up into the Chatsy chat room. Spotlight on the different activities and upcoming events and our partners and that we're working on, whatever different projects we're working on, including the list of partners we talked about for this show, which is a whole army of them.
Yeah, we're really fortunate to have the friends that we have, and and there are some people who want to jump in as well, and for this series as well as future series that we're going to be doing.
And we get your feedback directly from the website too. Right. Click on the feedback button, and you can send us a message. Goes to our email, arisenstrength@arisenstrength.com. You can email us, Wayne@arisenstrength.com, Shane@arisenstrength.com.
And talk about Twitter. Folks, I want you to help me out here. I want you to use the hashtag Life is Worth Living. For those who are helping us out, our partners and everything like that, they're going to be using hashtag Life is Worth Living in a lot of different posts that they're doing. I want to see how far along we can get this out. And I know that probably somebody else has done it. I don't care. What I'm talking about is overall. I want to get this out to people so that they see it. Believe it or not, that makes a difference to somebody. If somebody's sitting there and they're feeling the way that I felt in the past, and they see hashtag is worth living, yeah, I know what the stigma is. The stigma is yeah, right. It's not worth living. Believe me, it makes a difference because language makes a difference. And so that's what we're going to be talking about, for the upcoming shows that we're going to be doing. The next show that we're going to talk about is value. It's going to be really predominantly about valuing one's life and what it means to value yourself to where it means something, not to anybody else but you. So, live life with purpose, and we'll see you on Thursday night when we get to interview with Claudia, and we bring a little bit more to suicide awareness. Thanks again. Have a good night, folks.
Good night, everybody.
Night, everybody.
See you in Chatsy.